No music, no titles, no sweeping aerial drone shot of Turkey. Just a sound, the dull, heavy crack of a man's fist driving a hammer into a plaster wall. And then, nothing. Silence, then the sound of small rocks falling, and then a larger sound, the hollow, resonant boom of something on the other side. Not a wall, a room, not a room. Something bigger, something deeper. In 1963, a man in Cappadocia, Turkey, knocked down a wall in his basement. That's it. That's how it started. A home renovation. A man with a hammer and an afternoon to kill. Behind the wall, he found a room. Behind that room, another room. Behind that room, a tunnel. The tunnel went down. He followed it. Down through solid rock. Down past one level. Then another. Then another. Then another. He kept going. And going. Until he couldn't go any farther. When archaeologists finally mapped what that man had found beneath his feet, they stood in silence for a long time. Because the numbers didn't make sense. The scale didn't make sense. The tunnel system dropped 280 feet into the earth. 18 levels, each carved from solid volcanic rock. Miles of passages connecting thousands of rooms, ventilation shafts, water wells, storage chambers large enough to feed an army, living quarters, kitchens, chapels, schools, even, and this is the part that stops you cold, a wine cellar. This was Derinkuyu, the largest underground city ever discovered by modern archaeology. And here is the fact that will not let you sleep tonight. It was designed to hold 20,000 people. Not for a few days, for months, maybe years. The ventilation system still works. The wells still tap the same underground aquifer. The stone doors still roll on their tracks, 20,000 people underground, for months, in the dark, by choice, now. You can look at those numbers and feel the way most people feel, a kind of stunned admiration. Ancient people, bronze tools, underground city. Incredible. But that's not the question. That's never been the question. The question, the real question, the one that has been sitting at the center of this mystery for 6 decades, is not how, it's why. Why would any group of human beings, at any point in history, decide to carve an 18-story city into solid rock and then seal themselves inside it? Why does this city go down 18 levels when 10 would be more than sufficient? Why does every passage include defensive features? Why are the water supplies specifically designed to be undetectable from the surface? Why do the stone doors only lock from the inside? Why? The easy answer, the one that gets repeated in every history textbook and travel brochure, is armies. Derinkuyu sits in a region that has been invaded by virtually every major military power in the ancient world. Hittites, Persians, Romans, Arab caliphates, Mongol hordes. Of course they built a hiding place, but here's what bothers me. You don't build this for armies. You don't spend generations, plural, carving 2.5 million cubic feet of solid rock out of the earth just to hide from a cavalry unit that will spend 3 days ransacking your village and move on. Armies raid. They loot, they burn, and then they leave. This is different. This is the architecture of sustained terror. This is what you build when you know the threat is coming back. When you know you will need to disappear for months at a time. When you believe, with enough conviction to commit entire generations to an underground construction project, that the surface world is not safe. Maybe not for decades, and Derinkuyu isn't alone. Archaeologists have found over 36 confirmed underground cities in the Cappadocia region, hundreds of smaller tunnel complexes. Some of them connect to each other through tunnels that stretch for miles. You could travel from one underground city to another without ever once seeing the sky. An entire civilization, not a tribe, not a village, but a civilization, went underground. The question isn't just what they were hiding from. The question is, what did they know that we don't? Open Loop 1. This was not a shelter. It was the architecture of sustained terror. Something drove 20,000 people underground and kept them there for months. What terrified an entire civilization enough to build this? Before we get to the why, we need to sit with the how, because the engineering of Derinkuyu is so far beyond what should have been possible that most modern structural engineers, when confronted with the full scope of what was built, give the same response: silence, then slow, reluctant admiration. Let's start with the rock itself. The geological formation beneath Cappadocia is called tuff, compressed volcanic ash formed over millions of years from the eruptions of ancient volcanoes. This matters for one very specific reason. Tuff is soft enough to carve by hand, but it hardens when exposed to air. So, when ancient workers cut into it, they had a brief window where the material behaved almost like dense clay. Workable, responsive to iron tools, before it solidified into something close to concrete. This is good news, but only in the most grudging way possible, because we are still talking about carving 2.5 million cubic feet of rock by hand. In the dark, underground, with no power tools, no electricity, no modern ventilation, no OSHA guidelines, no way to call for help if something went wrong. Let's make that number real. 2.5 million cubic feet of removed rock. That is roughly equivalent to carving out the interior volume of 4 Empire State Buildings. By hand, with bronze and iron chisels, wooden mallets, and clay oil lamps that produced as much smoke as light. And here's the part nobody talks about. All of that rock had to go somewhere. Millions of cubic feet of stone and rubble don't just vanish. But archaeologists have found no debris field near Derinkuyu. No massive pile of excavated rock sitting in a valley nearby. No ancient quarry filled with tough fragments. The rock simply disappeared. Either they hauled it miles away and scattered it, or they ground it to dust and spread it across fields. Both options, when you do the logistics math, represent an almost incomprehensible investment of human labor. This wasn't a project, it was a civilization-scale commitment. The ventilation system, where the real genius lives. The 52 shafts that made everything possible. Of all the engineering achievements at Derinkuyu, the ventilation system is the one that keeps structural engineers up at night. Not because it's the most impressive, though it is, because of what it implies about the planning. There are 52 ventilation shafts at Derinkuyu. Each one runs from the surface down to the lowest inhabited levels. Some are over 180 feet deep. They are approximately 3 feet wide. They are, and this is the critical detail, perfectly vertical. Not close to vertical, not mostly vertical, perfectly vertical, with deviation measured in fractions of an inch across hundreds of feet of solid rock. Think about that engineering problem for a moment. You cannot dig a vertical shaft from the bottom up. Gravity won't cooperate, so you must start at the surface and dig straight down. But if you're digging straight down through solid rock, you have to remove the debris as you go, which means lifting every single piece of excavated stone up through the same narrow shaft you're actively digging. The workers at the bottom have no natural light, no electronic sensors, no laser levels. They are navigating by the feel of the rock and the sound of their tools. How do you keep a shaft perfectly vertical under those conditions for 180 feet? We don't entirely know. The current best theory involves plumb bobs, simple weights on strings, combined with careful measurement at each level. But theory and reality are two different things. Whatever technique they used, it worked. Every single shaft worked. Every one of them still provides airflow today. But here's what makes the ventilation system genuinely frightening, rather than just impressive. It had to be built first, before any of the living quarters, before any of the storage rooms, before any of the defensive features. Because without ventilation, everything else is a tomb. You cannot put 20,000 people in sealed underground chambers without a functional air circulation system. They would suffocate in hours. So, the very first workers, the ones who started this entire impossible project, had to sink 52 shafts through solid rock into complete darkness, trusting that their calculations were correct, trusting that the air would flow, trusting that the whole thing would actually work. With zero ability to test it before committing, the shafts are positioned to create natural convection. Warm air rises through some shafts, cool air descends through others. The entire system breathes without any mechanical assistance. It still breathes. Right now, as you watch this, air is moving through those shafts exactly as it was designed to move 3,000 years ago. The water system, engineering that defies logic drinking water. They could not see. The second engineering miracle at Derinkuyu is the water system. And it tells us something profoundly disturbing about the minds that designed this place. There are wells throughout the city, deep, narrow shafts cut through solid rock until they hit underground aquifers. Some are over 180 feet deep. They are about 2 feet wide. They were cut, like everything else, by hand, in the dark, with hand tools. But here's what stops me cold every time I think about it. Every single well hit water. Not most of them, not the majority, every one. And they're distributed across multiple levels of the city, positioned so that water supply is maintained even if one shaft is compromised. The system is redundant, fault-tolerant, resilient in a way that modern infrastructure engineers deliberately design for. This means whoever designed Derinkuyu understood the underground hydrology of this specific site well enough to drill a 2-foot hole through 180 feet of solid rock and know in advance exactly where the water was. They couldn't take core samples. They couldn't use ground-penetrating radar. They couldn't run test bores and recalibrate. Every well had to work on the first attempt, and every well did. The level of geological knowledge this implies is based on everything we think we know about ancient technology. several hundred years ahead of where it should be. And there's a detail about the water system that most sources skip over entirely. The main well shaft runs from the surface all the way to the lowest inhabited level. That's 280 feet. At the surface, this well looks like just another well, indistinguishable from any agricultural well in the region. From the outside, it is invisible. From the inside, it is the city's lifeline. If you are an invading army and you find the city, you cannot find the water supply. You cannot poison it. You cannot seal it. You cannot threaten it. The water is simply unreachable from above. That is not the design of a hiding place. That is the design of a fortress. The scale problem, one wrong foot. The math that keeps engineers awake. I want to pause here and make sure we fully understand the scale of what we're looking at, because it's easy to let the numbers slide by without landing. 18 levels, 280 feet deep, approximately 4 square miles of tunnels and rooms, 20,000 people, months at a time. Now add this. Every single engineering decision in this city had to be correct the first time, because there was no way to fix it after the fact. The ventilation shafts could not be dug in the wrong place. If you put a shaft in the wrong position, it doesn't connect to the circulation pattern, and the levels below it suffocate. Not theoretically. Actually, people die. The wells could not miss the aquifer. If you drill 180 feet and hit dry rock, you cannot just move over a few feet and try again. You're in the middle of an inhabited underground city. The shaft is fixed, miss the aquifer, and eventually everyone dies of thirst. The structural columns had to be placed correctly. The tuff is strong, but not infinitely so. Put the columns in the wrong positions, and the ceilings collapse. Underground, in the dark, with 20,000 people inside. One miscalculation, one wrong measurement, one moment of overconfidence in ancient surveying technology, and every single person who went underground would never come back up. The people who designed this city understood that margin for error in a way that makes modern safety standards look casual. And they built it anyway, because whatever was above them was apparently worse than the risk of building it wrong. Stop. We need to talk about the doors, not because they're the most technically impressive feature of Derinkuyu. They're not. Not because they're the most mysterious. They're not that either. We need to talk about the doors, because the doors are where this stops being an architectural puzzle and becomes something else entirely. The doors of Derinkuyu are massive circular slabs of volcanic rock, 3 to 5 feet in diameter, 1 to 2 feet thick. They weigh between 400 and 1,000 pounds each. They roll on tracks cut directly into the floor. When they are closed, they seal their passages completely. No gap, no crack, solid stone flush against solid stone. Every major passage in the city has one. Every connection between levels. Every critical junction. The architects created dozens of separate zones, each independently sealable. If something breaches the first level, you don't retreat to a single room. You fall back, level by level, sealing each zone behind you as you go. That is extraordinarily sophisticated defensive architecture. But here's the detail that changes everything. The doors only lock from the inside. There is no handle on the outside, no grip, No mechanism, no way to open them from the tunnel side. Once a door rolls closed, you are committed. You are underground. You are sealed off from the world above. And there is nothing to do but wait. There is a small hole in the center of each door, about 6 inches across, just large enough to push a spear through. Not to unlock it, not to reach the mechanism, just to stab anything that gets too close to the other side. You defend the door. You don't open it. That's the design. That's the intent. These doors are not features of a fortress you hold and then counterattack from. They are features of a hole you crawl into and seal shut and pray that whatever is above you gets bored or dies or moves on before you run out of food. This city was not built by people who intended to fight. It was built by people who had learned, through experience painful enough to justify this entire undertaking, that fighting was not an option. Whatever they faced above them was something they could not fight, something they could only hide from and pray. Think about the psychological weight of that decision. You hear the alarm. You gather your children, your elderly parents, your livestock, whatever food you can carry. You descend into the rock. You hear the grinding of stone on stone as the doors roll closed above you. The light from the surface disappears. You are in the dark. You are 50 feet underground, and every person you love is with you. And you wait. Layers of desperation, the defensive architecture. The labyrinth that was designed to kill the doors are only the beginning of Derinkuyu's defensive architecture. Every single feature of this city's layout is designed around the same assumption. At some point, something is going to get past the first door. And when it does, we need to make sure it never reaches the bottom. The passages are narrow, deliberately, systematically narrow, 5 feet high, 3 feet wide. You cannot stand up straight. You cannot walk side by side. You have to crouch, turn sideways in places, move single file. This isn't a structural limitation. The builders could have carved the tunnels any width they wanted. This is a tactical decision. In a 3-foot wide tunnel, one person with a spear controls the space completely. An invading force of 1,000 soldiers becomes, effectively, a single file line. You don't fight an army in there. You fight one man, again and again, and each time you win. The ceiling height changes without warning. You're walking hunched in a 5-foot tunnel, and then the ceiling drops to 4 feet, and then 3. You have to crawl. And when you're on your hands and knees in the dark, your weapon is useless, your head is down, and anyone waiting around the next corner has every advantage. The turns are sharp. Every 20 or 30 feet, another corner, another potential ambush. You can never see more than 30 feet ahead. You can never build momentum. You can never charge. The walls contain alcoves, small recesses, just large enough for one person to press into and disappear from sight. If you know they're there, if you've spent your whole life navigating these tunnels, you know exactly where to stand to be invisible. If you're an invader with a torch, trying to move quickly through unfamiliar passages, you never know where the next attack is coming from. The ventilation shafts double as weapons. They run vertically through multiple levels. From above, you can drop anything: boiling water, hot oil, burning material, straight down onto anyone below. They cannot see it coming. They cannot block it. The shaft is too narrow to climb, and too smooth to grip. It's a one-way delivery system for violence. There are murder holes in the ceilings, small openings, precisely placed, just large enough for a spear thrust. You're walking down a passage and a spear comes through the ceiling. There is no warning. There is no defense. There are false doors, stone wheels that look exactly like the real defensive doors, but lead nowhere. You waste time and energy trying to open them. You grow frustrated. Your attention wanders. And while you're focused on a door that goes nowhere, the real door, the one that matters, is somewhere else, already closing. Dead ends everywhere. Passages that look promising, that go 20 feet, 50 feet, and then stop. Solid wall. Now you have to turn around and backtrack through everything you just came through, not knowing what's behind you. Some tunnels have deliberately weakened ceilings, stone that the defenders can collapse with a single well-placed strike, burying pursuers alive or simply blocking the passage. This isn't a hiding place. This is a killing machine. An incredibly sophisticated, entirely passive killing machine that requires no soldiers, no maintenance, and no courage to operate. You just retreat, seal the doors, and let the architecture do the work. The doors show where. They were used evidence the doors were rolled shut more than once. The stone tracks that the doors roll along are polished smooth in places, worn down from repeated friction, not from one use or 5 uses or 10, from many uses over many years. The threat came back. Whatever drove them underground the first time, it came back. Again and again, regularly enough that the tracks show measurable wear. People practiced the drill. They knew the routes. They knew which passages led where, which doors closed in which order, how long it took to get everyone inside. This was not an emergency measure for a single catastrophic event. This was a standard operating procedure. This was how life worked. The city has rooms specifically designed for guards next to the door mechanisms, stone benches carved into the alcoves, niches for oil lamps at exactly the right height for a seated person, weapon racks cut directly into the walls. Someone sat in those rooms for hours, days, watching the door, waiting for something to try to breach it. What do you watch for, sitting in the dark next to a 1,000-pound stone door? What requires a guard with a spear positioned inside a sealed underground city? And why do some of the door frames have scratches on the outside? Not tool marks, not erosion patterns. Irregular, scattered marks across the outer stone face, as if something tried to claw through. Maybe it's just wear. Maybe it's just centuries of random damage. But in the dark, in that tunnel, with that door in front of you, it doesn't look like nothing. If you draw a line between Europe and Asia, between the Mediterranean world and the ancient heartlands of Mesopotamia, Persia, and the Far East, that line runs directly through Cappadocia. This has always been true. It was true 3,000 years ago. It was true 2,000 years ago. It is true today. That geographic reality has one brutal consequence. Cappadocia has been invaded by virtually every military power that ever rose to prominence in the ancient world. Not occasionally, systematically, repeatedly, for millennia. The Hittites built their empire through this region in the 2nd millennium BCE. The Assyrians followed. Then the Persians, who held it for 2 centuries. Then Alexander the Great swept through. Then Rome absorbed it into the largest empire the Western world had ever seen. Then the Arab caliphates pushed north in waves across the 7th and 8th centuries CE. Then the Mongols, who in the 13th century destroyed populations on a scale that still staggers modern historians. Each of these invasions brought armies. Each army brought the same things: fire, looting, slaughter, and the taking of slaves. Each time, the people of Cappadocia faced the same impossible choice: resist and die, flee and lose everything, or hide. Most people chose to hide. The question was always, where? The Bronze Age collapse, when civilization itself failed, the century that broke the ancient world. To understand the specific fear that shaped the design of Derinkuyu, you have to understand the Bronze Age collapse. This was not a minor historical disruption. This was, by any reasonable measure, the most complete civilizational catastrophe the ancient world ever experienced. Between approximately 1200 and 1150 BCE, across a period of roughly 50 years, nearly every major civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East simultaneously collapsed, not declined. Collapsed. The Mycenaean civilization of Greece, which had built palaces at Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos, and whose culture would eventually give birth to Homer's epics, gone. The cities burned, the palace system dissolved, the writing system forgotten. The Hittite Empire, which at its height had contested Egypt for dominance of the entire Near East, gone. The capital Hattusa burned to the ground and never rebuilt. The great Bronze Age cities of Ugarit, Megiddo, Hazor, and dozens of others, all destroyed within a generation of each other. The archaeological evidence shows not just destruction, but abandonment. People left and didn't come back. In Egypt, the pharaoh Ramesses III recorded in stone what he witnessed. Waves of people from the sea, displaced and desperate, attacking Egypt's borders in migrations that looked less like invasions and more like a civilization-scale exodus. He fought them off. But even Egypt, the greatest power of the age, was permanently weakened. Modern researchers now believe the Bronze Age collapse was caused not by any single event, but by a cascading systems failure. Drought, famine, political instability, disrupted trade networks, and what historians call sea peoples, migrations, all compounding each other in a feedback loop that none of the affected civilizations had the resilience to absorb. In the span of a single human lifetime, a world that had been largely stable for 3 centuries dissolved into chaos. The people of Cappadocia lived through this, not read about it, lived through it. They watched the great empires of their world collapse in real time. They saw refugees and raiders moving across the landscape in numbers they had never witnessed before. Not armies with flags and formations, but desperate, starving, violent masses of people who had lost everything and would take anything they could find. It was in this world, this specific world of compounding collapse and rising desperation, that the earliest sections of Derinkuyu were carved. The logic of human threat, why hiding works, what armies actually want. Here's something important about invading armies that gets lost in the dramatic retellings. They are not primarily interested in you. They are interested in your stuff: grain stores, livestock, gold, silver, metal tools, weapons, cloth. These are the things worth taking. These are the things that justify the cost of the campaign: the soldiers' pay, the supply train, the risk of casualties. If your stuff is in the ground, and your people are in the ground, and the ground is sealed with 1,000-pound stone doors, the army has a problem. They can't find the grain. They can't find the livestock. They can't find the people. They can search for days and find nothing but farmland and empty houses, because Derinkuyu's entrances are hidden. Some are concealed in the bottoms of wells. Others are disguised as storage buildings. Some enter through what appear to be ordinary cellars. If you don't know what you're looking for, you won't find them. An army with 10,000 soldiers cannot afford to spend 3 weeks in a single village trying to locate an underground city it doesn't know exists. It moves on. It finds easier targets. It goes somewhere the people haven't hidden. This is deterrence through disappearance. Make yourself impossible to find, and eventually your enemies give up looking. But the city's design goes beyond simple hiding. It assumes explicitly that sometimes the hiding fails, that sometimes the enemy finds the entrance, and it prepares for that scenario with the defensive architecture we've already described. The scale mismatch, where the human enemy theory starts to crack the problem with the simple answer: here's where I need you to think carefully, because this is where the standard explanation starts to break down. The human enemy theory. Armies, raiders, invasions explains a great deal about Derinkuyu. It explains the defensive architecture. It explains the hidden entrances. It explains why the city was used at irregular intervals over many centuries. But it does not explain the scale. You do not need 18 levels to hide from an army. You need 4, maybe 6. You need enough depth to have living quarters and food storage and water, and then you need to wait it out. Armies of the ancient world, with their logistics limitations and their need to keep moving, didn't maintain sieges of hidden underground positions for months at a time. They ransacked, they burned, they moved on. The bottom levels of Derinkuyu, the deepest, most protected sections, are remarkable not just for their depth, but for their completeness. Schools, chapels with carefully carved stone altars, meeting halls large enough for community gatherings, spaces designed not just for survival, but for the continuation of cultural life, education, religion, community decision-making. These are not features you carve when you expect to be underground for 2 weeks. These are features you carve when you expect to be underground for long enough that children need to keep learning, communities need to keep making decisions together, and the question of what to believe in needs to remain answerable. The human enemy theory explains the military architecture of Derinkuyu. It does not explain why someone decided children needed a schoolroom 200 feet underground. It does not explain why the storage capacity is calibrated for months of occupation rather than weeks. It does not explain why generation after generation kept expanding and improving this city long after the specific invasion that prompted its initial construction had passed into history. Something else was driving this, something bigger than armies. Or maybe the armies were only part of it. Maybe the armies arrived in the context of something larger, a larger catastrophe, a larger disruption, and the city was a response to all of it at once. To understand what that larger catastrophe might have been, we need to look at the sky. Open loop 2. The human enemy explains the defensive architecture. It does not explain why children needed schools 200 feet underground. What kind of threat requires planning for months, not weeks, of total darkness? Imagine waking up one morning in ancient Cappadocia and the air is wrong. Not metaphorically wrong, physically wrong. The smell is off, sharp and mineral, like the aftermath of a thunderstorm, but without the rain. The sky is a strange color, not the clean blue of a summer morning, but a pale, ashy gray. And the sun is still there, but it's wrong too. Dim, pale, a circle of light without warmth, like the moon decided to show up in the wrong part of the sky. You check your fields, the wheat is stunted, the barley looks confused, growing at the wrong rate, putting out grain at the wrong time. The birds that should be singing in the morning aren't there. The animals are restless. It gets colder. In summer, not pleasant. Cold. You've heard from traders that a village 3 valleys over has the same problem. And the village beyond that, and the city at the edge of the plain, which normally floods its fields in spring, reports that this year the floods didn't come. You don't know about volcanoes in Iceland. You have no concept of stratospheric aerosols. You have never heard the word climate. But you know, in your bones, that something has broken. Something large. Something that cannot be fixed with extra work, or better tools, or a prayer to the right God. The sky has turned against you, and you don't know when it's going to stop. The science of sky failure, volcanic winter. What turns a summer into a year without sun? The phenomenon described above is not speculation. It is not mythology dressed up in modern language. It is a well-documented, scientifically verified pattern that has repeated multiple times in recorded history and many more times in the geological record. When a sufficiently large volcano erupts, it injects sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, the upper atmosphere, well above the level where weather occurs. This sulfur dioxide reacts with water vapor to form tiny droplets of sulfuric acid, which spread globally within weeks and can remain in the upper atmosphere for 1 to 3 years. These droplets reflect sunlight back into space before it reaches Earth's surface. The result is a volcanic winter. Temperatures drop globally by 1 to 3 degrees Celsius on average, which sounds small until you understand that this is an average across the entire planet. In specific locations, in specific seasons, the temperature drop can be far more severe. Crops fail. Livestock die. Famine follows. The most well-documented example in modern history is the 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia. The eruption itself killed tens of thousands, but the volcanic winter that followed, 1816, known in the historical record as the year without a summer, killed hundreds of thousands more through famine across 3 continents. Snow fell in New England in June. Crops froze in July. Livestock starved. Food prices doubled, then tripled. Now go back 3,600 years, sometime around 1620 BCE, right in the window when Derinkuyu's earliest sections were being carved, the volcanic island of Thera in the southern Aegean Sea experienced one of the largest volcanic eruptions in the past 10,000 years. The Minoan eruption, as archaeologists call it, was approximately 4 times larger than Krakatoa and perhaps 7 times larger than Tambora. It ejected ash across the Mediterranean, visible in ice cores from Greenland to Antarctica, tree rings from oak trees in Ireland, from bristlecone pines in California, from fossilized forests in northern Europe, all record the same thing. A sudden, sharp climate disruption beginning around this date. Reduced growth, failed growing seasons, a world that got colder and darker without warning. This eruption did not just affect Thera, it affected Egypt, where records from the period speak of strange darkness and failed harvests. It affected the Levant, where cities that had flourished for centuries went quiet. It affected Cappadocia, where the ash from the eruption has been found in the soil record. And this is only one eruption. The geological record of the period shows multiple significant volcanic events across several centuries. Iceland, Italy, the Pacific, each one sending aerosols into the stratosphere, each one dropping temperatures, each one triggering crop failures, famines, disease outbreaks, and the mass population movements that followed desperate, hungry people. The evidence in the rock, why Derinkuyu is a survival bunker, reading the architecture as a climate response. If you look at Derinkuyu through the lens of climate catastrophe rather than military threat, the design choices that previously seemed merely impressive become frankly stunning in their prescience. The water system, designed to tap deep aquifers inaccessible from the surface, becomes a response to surface water contaminated by volcanic ash, which can cause severe gastrointestinal illness and in high enough concentrations is toxic. The deep aquifers provide water that has been filtered through hundreds of feet of rock, water that has never touched the contaminated surface layer. The enormous storage capacity, far larger than what any military siege scenario requires, becomes a stockpile against years-long famine. You are not storing grain for 3 weeks. You are storing grain for 18 months of crop failure. You are building the margin to outlast the sky itself. The connection tunnels between Derinkuyu and other underground cities in the region, tunnels stretching for miles underground, become emergency supply routes. If one city's stores run low, you send resources through the tunnel. If one city's entrance is blocked by an ashfall, you exit through another. The network functions like a distributed survival system, with redundancy built in at every level. The animal pens, for goats, sheep, possibly poultry, provide milk, meat, warmth, and a connection to the surface world that psychological research suggests is profoundly important for people isolated from nature. The breath of animals warms the air. Their sounds provide a sensory link to the living world above. They are food security in biological form. The wine cellar, yes, Derinkuyu has a wine cellar, becomes a source of calories, nutrition, and controlled fermentation that doesn't require fresh ingredients. In a prolonged surface-level crisis, wine is not a luxury. It is a concentrated source of energy that stores indefinitely and provides nutrition when grain stores start to fail. They thought of everything. The very depth of the city, 18 levels, 280 feet, which seems excessive for any military scenario, becomes entirely logical when the enemy is the sky itself. You go deep enough that the temperature is stable, that no volcanic ash can penetrate, that no surface-level disruption can reach you. You build to survive not a battle, but a geological event. The 536 event, the worst year in human history. The year the sun went away, Derinkuyu's construction spans multiple centuries, and it's worth pausing on an event that occurred much later in that timeline. An event that helps us understand what the designers of this city feared at a visceral level. In 536 CE, a mysterious fog settled over Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. Byzantine historian Procopius wrote that the sun shone without brightness for 18 months, were giving off light like the moon. The Byzantine chronicler John of Lydus wrote that the sun became dim for the whole year, so much so that fruits did not ripen. Modern climate scientists have identified this as the most severe episode of climate cooling in the past 2,000 years. A volcanic eruption, now tentatively identified as originating in Iceland or North America, injected massive amounts of aerosols into the stratosphere. Summer temperatures in Europe dropped by 1.5 to 2.5 degrees Celsius. In the Northern Hemisphere, 536 was followed by the coldest decade in the past 2,300 years. The immediate consequences: crop failures across Europe and Asia, famine, political instability, and then, arriving like a second blow, the plague of Justinian in 541 CE, one of the first major outbreaks of bubonic plague, which killed roughly 25 to 50 million people across the Byzantine Empire, Europe, and Asia. The people of Cappadocia, by 536 CE, Christian communities living in the region for several centuries, knew Derinkuyu. They had maintained it, they had expanded it, and in the context of dim suns and failed harvests and plague moving across the landscape, the city below their feet must have looked like exactly what it was: a salvation prepared by their ancestors for exactly this moment. This is the thing that makes Derinkuyu philosophically extraordinary, beyond its engineering. Its builders planned not for one specific threat, but for all threats. They built something versatile enough to serve as a military fortress, a climate shelter, a famine bunker, and a plague quarantine facility simultaneously. They built it to last for generations. And it did. Multiple generations of people facing multiple different kinds of crises all found the same refuge in the same place, built by people who had been dead for centuries. That is not luck. That is a particular kind of wisdom that our culture tends to attribute only to modern engineers. The wisdom of designing for the unknown. Building not for the threat you see, but for the threat you haven't imagined yet. Science can explain what happened. It can identify the ash layers, read the tree rings, map the temperature drops, trace the collapse of civilizations. But before science existed, before there were instruments and methodologies and peer-reviewed journals, there was something else that preserved the knowledge of catastrophe and transmitted it across generations. There were stories, not myths in the dismissive sense, not fairy tales, stories in the most fundamental sense, structured, emotionally resonant narratives that encode critical survival information in a form that the human brain is specifically designed to remember and transmit. Stories that use characters and conflict and resolution, not because ancient people were primitive, but because narrative is the most efficient information, storage, and retrieval system that the human nervous system has ever developed. The stories ancient people told about the sky falling and the earth swallowing them whole and the floods covering everything. These are not metaphors. They are news reports transmitted in the only medium available. The Gilgamesh Parallel, the oldest story in the world. A flood that everyone remembered. The Epic of Gilgamesh is among the oldest works of literature in human history. Fragments exist from as early as 2100 BCE, but oral traditions the tablets record are believed to be older. Much older. And at the center of this ancient Mesopotamian epic is a story that anyone who has ever attended a Sunday school class will find startlingly familiar. A great flood, a god who decides to destroy humanity. A single righteous man warned in advance, the building of a vessel, the survival of the man, his family, and a representation of the animal world. The waters receding, life beginning again. The same story, in its essential structure, appears in Sumerian myth, in the Hebrew Bible as the story of Noah, in Hindu tradition as the story of Manu, in Greek mythology as the story of Deucalion, and in dozens of other traditions across the ancient world. The specific details vary. The god's name changes, the vessel changes, the protagonist's name changes. But the core narrative, a catastrophic flood that nearly ended everything. Survived by one prepared group through divine warning or exceptional foresight, persists across cultures that had no contact with each other. The standard mythological interpretation says this reflects the universal human experience of floods. And that's true. But there's another interpretation. When a civilization-ending event happens, a flood, a volcanic winter, a famine, a collapse, the people who survive it don't just survive it. They carry it. They carry the memory of it in their bodies, in their language, in the stories they tell their children. And over generations, that memory becomes mythologized. The specific historical event becomes a universal narrative. The literal mechanism becomes a metaphor. The dead get names, and the names become gods. But the survival information is still there. Build a vessel. Store provisions for a long period. Protect the things that matter. Get inside before the flood comes, not after. These are practical instructions, encoded in narrative form, transmitted across thousands of years. The flood story isn't just theology, it's a survival manual with a frame story. The Egyptian night, Ra and the darkness. When gods fight for the sun, in ancient Egyptian cosmology, the sun god Ra does not simply rise and set. Ra travels through the underworld each night in a celestial bark, fighting the serpent Apophis, a creature of chaos and darkness who seeks to devour the sun and plunge the world into eternal night. Each morning that the sun rises is not automatic. It is a victory. Ra won. Again. This cosmological framework, the daily struggle to ensure the sun's return, seems like pure mythology. But consider, what would prompt an entire civilization to build a theological system around the anxiety that the sun might not rise tomorrow? A culture that had never experienced a prolonged solar dimming event would have no reason to worry about whether the sun would appear. The sun always appears. The sun is not in question. You might construct mythologies around the sun's power or its seasonal variations, but the idea that the sun itself might fail, that Apophis might win, that's a different level of existential anxiety. That's the theological residue of a lived experience. The anxiety that the sun might fail is the encoded memory of a time when the sun did fail, when it rose pale and dim through a sky choked with volcanic aerosols and provided neither warmth nor adequate light, and crops died in the fields, and the animals were hungry, and the children were sick, and nobody could explain why. In that world, the daily return of a full, warm, bright sun was not guaranteed. It was a relief, it was a victory, and it was rational to build an entire theological system around the anxiety that the victory might not come tomorrow. Persephone, the myth of necessary darkness. When the earth itself went into hiding, the Greek myth of Persephone is perhaps the most architecturally perfect encoding of climate memory in the ancient tradition. Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of agriculture and harvest, is abducted by Hades and taken into the underworld. While she is gone, Demeter's grief is expressed as the withdrawal of agricultural fertility from the world. Nothing grows, the earth freezes, livestock fail, humans begin to starve. The gods. Alarmed, broker a compromise. Persephone will return to the surface for part of the year. When she is above ground, the world blooms. When she descends again, winter comes. On the surface, so to speak, this is an origin story for the seasons, a just-so explanation for why summer and winter exist. But listen to the emotional register of the myth more carefully. Demeter doesn't just cause winter, she causes a catastrophic, existential agricultural failure that threatens to end human civilization. The gods themselves have to intervene. The crisis is civilizational, not seasonal. This is not an explanation for ordinary winter. This is a description of an extraordinary winter. A winter that lasted too long, that came in the wrong season, that didn't end when it should have. A winter that killed things that ordinary winters don't kill. The myth preserves the terror of the event, even as it domesticates it into a seasonal cycle. Every year, Persephone descends. Every year, the harvest goddess mourns. Every year, the earth remembers what it felt like when the sky went wrong and the growing season failed. Not because this happens every year, but because the memory of when it happened once, when it happened catastrophically, when it happened in a way that changed the world, is too important to let go of. So, it gets rehearsed. Every year. In the structure of the calendar. In the rhythm of planting and harvest. In the story of a goddess who went underground so the rest of them could survive. She went underground. They planted the memory in the calendar. They kept telling the story so the knowledge would not die. The Fimbulwinter, when myth names the catastrophe. The Norse memory of the end. In Norse mythology, the end of the world, Ragnarok, is preceded by Fimbulwinter, 3 consecutive winters without a summer between them. Snow blows from all directions. The sun provides no warmth. Crops fail across the world. People and animals die in vast numbers. The social order collapses. Neighbor turns against neighbor. Family bonds dissolve under the pressure of starvation. This is not a metaphor for ordinary hardship. This is a specific, precise, climatological event encoded in theological language. 3 consecutive winters without summer. That's not bad weather. That's a multi-year volcanic cooling event. Modern climatologists have identified a possible candidate. The Laki eruption in Iceland in 535 to 536 CE. which is associated with the coldest decade in over 2 millennia, killed roughly half the livestock in Europe and Asia in the following years, and preceded the first Great Plague pandemic by just 5 years. The Norse people, whose ancestors had experienced what the climate record tells us was one of the worst periods of climate disruption in recorded history, preserved that experience in their mythology. They didn't call it a volcanic aerosol event. They called it Fimble Winter, but the experience they're describing is identical. 3 winters without summer. Everything dies. The gods themselves cannot stop it. And the survivors? In Norse mythology, 2 humans survive Ragnarok by hiding in a forest, or, in some versions, inside the trunk of a great tree, sheltered from the killing cold, eating morning dew, waiting for the world to begin again. They went underground, or deep inside. They hid, they waited, they survived. Sound familiar? Cultural memory as blueprint myths are not fairy tales. They are survival guides. The patterns across these myths are not coincidental. The same fears keep surfacing. Floods, darkness, endless winter, fire from the sky, the failure of the sun, the death of the harvest. They appear in Mesopotamia and Egypt, in Greece and India, in Scandinavia and Central America, in traditions with no historical contact with each other. The simplest explanation, and in this case, Occam's razor seems to genuinely apply, is that these fears appear everywhere because the events that generated them happened everywhere. Volcanic winters are global. Droughts can be continental. Pandemics don't respect borders. The people who survived these events created stories to preserve the survival information. The stories spread. They became mythology. They became religion. They became the structure of the calendar and the format of prayer. The builders of Derinkuyu grew up with these stories. They heard about the time the sky went dark and the crops died. They heard about the flood that covered everything. They heard about the plague that came from the water. They heard about the armies that moved like a tide across the landscape, displacing every population in their path, and they built accordingly, not for one threat, for all of them. Mythology didn't just tell them what to fear, it told them what to do. Get underground, store provisions, protect your water. Keep the doors sealed. Teach your children how to live in the dark. Wait for the world to recover. These myths weren't bedtime stories. They were building instructions. Close your eyes for a moment. Actually, close them. Not for long. Just long enough to experience what everyone in Derinkuyu experienced every single time they woke up. Nothing. Not the reddish glow through your eyelids that tells you the sun is up. Not the sounds of birds or wind, or the distant voices of people going about their morning routines. Not the smell of fresh air or dew or coming rain. Just black. And the sound of other people breathing in a confined space, and the faint smell of oil lamps and cook smoke, and the accumulated breath of thousands of humans and dozens of animals. This is what waking up meant in Derinkuyu. Every morning, for months. If you had never known anything else, it might be bearable. Children who grew up in the tunnels. And there were children who grew up in the tunnels, as evidenced by the schoolrooms with their small stone benches and their carved teaching surfaces, probably adapted in ways that adult newcomers couldn't. The brain is plastic, especially young brains. You can learn to navigate by sound, by touch, by the faint air currents from the ventilation shafts. You can learn which turn leads where, which passage has the low ceiling, which stone steps are uneven. But the body knows. The human circadian rhythm is calibrated to sunlight, not general light. Sunlight specifically, the particular spectrum of light produced by the sun at particular times of day. Without it, the internal clock drifts. Sleep patterns fragment. The hormonal cycles that regulate mood, appetite, and immune function begin to malfunction over weeks and months. This produces effects that modern psychology has a clinical name for: cave syndrome. And in the pre-modern world, without any of the coping tools we've developed, it would have been simply a slow, pervasive misery that nobody could explain or treat. Michael Ziffre and the experience of timelessness. What a single scientist discovered about the dark in 1962. French cave explorer Michel Ziffre descended alone into a glacier cave in the Alps. He stayed for 2 months, cut off from sunlight, without clocks, without any external time references. His goal was to study the human experience of biological time in the absence of environmental cues. What he discovered was disturbing. Within weeks, his internal clock had completely decoupled from real time. He was sleeping when he felt tired, awaking when he felt rested, but his sleep cycles expanded dramatically, sometimes stretching to 20 or 30 hours. His sense of elapsed time was wildly inaccurate. When he thought 2 days had passed, it was sometimes 4. His mood deteriorated. He became anxious and irritable. Toward the end of his experiment, he began experiencing auditory hallucinations. And Ziffre was alone in a cave he chose to enter for a scientific purpose he believed in, with the knowledge that he could leave at any time. He was, in every relevant way, in the best possible psychological conditions for this experience. Now scale that experience to 20,000 people of all ages, including children who don't understand why they can't go outside. Elderly people whose physical frailty makes the close quarters harder. Pregnant women. The people with existing health conditions. People who are afraid, packed into confined spaces, with no guarantee of when or whether they'll see the surface again. The psychological pressure would have been enormous, not dramatic, not explosive, just enormous, grinding, heavy, relentless, present in every waking moment, and probably in dreams as well. What the evidence tells us about daily life, how they kept humanity alive in the dark, and yet they survived. Not just biologically, they maintained a functioning community. We know this because the archaeological evidence tells us, in its quiet way, that these were not desperate people, barely hanging on. They were people trying to live well under impossible circumstances. The school rooms have small benches, low tables, surfaces that show evidence of repeated use. Children were being taught, not occasionally, as a distraction, systematically, as a continuing priority. Someone decided that even underground, even under existential threat, the education of children could not stop. Because if the children don't learn, the civilization dies with its adults. The chapels are carefully carved, with attention to acoustics, with niches for lamps positioned to create the most flattering light for worship. Someone cared about beauty underground. Someone cared about the quality of the sacred space, even at 200 feet below the surface. Religion wasn't just practiced in these chapels, it was practiced with intention and care. Archaeologists have found evidence of winemaking and oil pressing at Derinkuyu. This is not strictly necessary for survival. You can survive without wine. You can survive with minimal oil. These are activities that speak to something beyond bare survival, to the maintenance of a particular quality of life, to the continuation of cultural practices that made people feel, even underground, like themselves. The most haunting evidence of normal life is the toys. Small carved objects, shapes of animals, rolling toys that could be pulled by a string, found in the areas identified as children's spaces. These were not carving exercises. These were presents. Someone in the dark, 200 feet underground, with an unknown number of days of imprisonment still ahead of them, made a toy for a child. Because the child needed to play. Because play is not a luxury. Because in a world of stone and smoke and fear, a child with a carved wooden horse is still, in some essential way, a child. These people were not simply surviving. They were insisting on being human while doing it. The communal dynamics, trust as infrastructure. 20,000 people, one underground city, no exit. Humans are social animals. We are built for community, but we are built for community with options, with the ability to leave, to find space, to be alone when we need to be. Remove the options and the social dynamics change. In Derinkuyu, you could not leave. Once the stone doors rolled closed, everyone inside was committed to the same timeline, the same food supply, the same air, the same water. Your neighbor's bad behavior was your problem. Your neighbor's sickness was potentially your sickness. Your neighbor's despair was a contagion you had to manage along with your own. The historical record of enclosed communities under stress, polar expeditions, long naval voyages, modern prison populations, people trapped in caves or bunkers during military conflicts, is consistent on a few points. Trust erodes faster than food. Hierarchy becomes more important and more contested simultaneously. Small grievances grow into major conflicts when there is no space to escape them. Strong community bonds before entering confinement predict survival outcomes dramatically better than any other variable. The city's design actually addresses some of this. The size of the spaces, the variety of room types, from intimate family chambers to large communal halls, suggests that the designers understood the need for both privacy and community. You could be alone when you needed to. You could gather when you needed to. The chapels would have served a function beyond the purely spiritual. Shared ritual is one of the most powerful known mechanisms for maintaining social cohesion under stress. When people participate together in the same practices, the same prayers, the same songs, the same liturgical calendar, they reinforce their common identity and their shared stakes. The chapels at Derinkuyu were not just places to pray. They were community-binding mechanisms, social infrastructure. So was the wine. The children of darkness, a generation unlike any other, what it does to you when dark is normal. The most haunting question about life in Derinkuyu is not what it was like for adults who entered the city already formed, who had memories of the surface, who knew the smell of rain and the feel of wind and the way the light changes at sunset. The adults had those memories to return to in their minds. They had a reference point. The children born underground, or who entered so young they had no meaningful memories of the surface. What did Derinkuyu mean to them? What was their mental model of the world? The world was rock. The world was the glow of oil lamps. The world was the sounds of other people nearby, always, without exception. The world was warm in some passages and cool in others, and you learned the temperature map the same way you learned which passages turned which way, by feel, by repetition, by the accumulated knowledge of a body moving through a known space. The world ended at the stone doors. What is the psychological effect of growing up in an environment where the sky is a theoretical concept rather than a daily experience? Where sunlight exists in stories but not in sensory memory? Where outside means danger, and the only safety is deep in the rock. Modern developmental psychology suggests the effects would be significant and lasting. Children develop spatial reasoning, emotional regulation, and fundamental models of the world through sensory interaction with their environment. A child raised in confined, controlled, low-light conditions would develop differently from a surface-raised child in measurable ways. Their sensitivity to light stimuli would be heightened. Their spatial cognition would be calibrated to three-dimensional underground navigation rather than open surface orientation. Their fundamental emotional landscape would be shaped by the experience of confinement rather than openness. When those children eventually returned to the surface, when the doors finally rolled open and the light came in, what was that experience like? We have no records, no accounts, but we can imagine, terrifying and wonderful simultaneously, like being born again into a world that was simultaneously everything you'd been told it was and utterly overwhelming in ways nothing underground could have prepared you for. The brightness alone, the sheer, unfiltered brightness of Turkish summer sunlight after months of oil lamps, like staring into fire with your whole body. The scars that survived, PTSD before the concept existed, what they carried back to the surface. The return to the surface did not end the experience of Derinkuyu. It carried forward into every subsequent generation. People who experience severe threat to their lives, to their children's lives, to everything they care about, are changed by that experience in documented, measurable ways. Their nervous systems recalibrate. Their threat detection systems become more sensitive. Their emotional responses to ambiguous situations are weighted toward fear rather than calm. We now understand this as trauma. Post-traumatic stress, in its various forms, is a normal neurological response to abnormal danger. It's not a sign of weakness or pathology. It's the brain doing exactly what it evolved to do, using a catastrophic experience to recalibrate threat detection for an environment it now knows can be catastrophically dangerous. The people who emerged from Derinkuyu after months of darkness, uncertainty, and confinement carried that recalibration with them. They carried it into their decisions about how to live, where to store food, how much to trust strangers, how quickly to close their doors. They carried it into the stories they told their children. The stories said, "This can happen. This has happened. The sky can fail. The armies can come. The world above ground can become uninhabitable. When that happens, you need to know what to do. You need to be ready. You need to know the tunnels and the stores and the wells and the stone doors that lock from the inside. The trauma became cultural memory. The cultural memory became architecture. The architecture became theology. The theology became myth. And 2,800 years later, an archaeologist stands in a tunnel 200 feet below the surface of Turkey and reads it all, written in stone. Close Loop 1. Now we understand what sustained terror looks like. Not a single night of fear. A lifetime of knowing it could happen again. Of building, teaching, and passing on the knowledge that when the world above fails, the world below is ready. Close Loop 2. The schoolrooms, the chapels, the wine cellars, the toys, these are not the features of a military bunker. They are the features of a civilization that learned it might have to become entirely self-contained. Not for weeks, for as long as the world required. We have been in the dark for a long time now, down through the engineering impossibilities and the defensive architecture, through the historical cataclysms and the mythological echoes, through the psychological tolls and the small heartbreaks of children who grew up without seeing the sky. It's time to come back up, slowly, the way you have to, after months underground, because the light is too much to take all at once. Let me tell you what I think actually drove people into Derinkuyu. Not the clean, simple answer that makes for a satisfying documentary. The real answer, which is messy and plural and refuses to resolve into a single explanation. They went underground because of armies. That's true. The Cappadocia region's position at the crossroads of ancient civilizations made invasion not a possibility, but a certainty. The Bronze Age collapse sent desperate populations moving across the landscape in waves that no existing defensive structure could have handled. The human enemy was real, present, and recurring. They went underground because of the sky. That's true too. Multiple volcanic events in the centuries surrounding Derinkuyu's construction and expansion caused documented climate disruptions, failed harvests, and famine conditions that would have made the surface world genuinely lethal for extended periods. The environmental catastrophe was real, documented in the geological record. They went underground because their myths told them to. True, as well, the stories they had inherited from their ancestors, the flood narratives, the darkness myths, the survival accounts, encoded survival information in narrative form and transmitted it across generations precisely so it would be available in moments like this. But underneath all three answers, deeper than the armies, deeper than the climate, deeper even than the mythology, there is a fourth answer. The only answer that explains not just why they built Derinkuyu, but why they kept building it, kept maintaining it, kept teaching their children to navigate it, kept drilling the evacuation procedures, generation after generation, even in times of relative peace. They went underground because they were paying attention, because the evidence of history, accumulated over centuries, encoded in scar tissue and story, and the wear marks on stone door tracks, had taught them a truth that we are only now beginning to rediscover with the tools of modern science. The surface world is fragile. Civilizations are fragile. The sky can fail. The armies can come, the water can run out. And when any of those things happen simultaneously, as they did during the Bronze Age collapse, as they did in 536 CE, as they have done repeatedly throughout human history, the only thing that keeps a community alive is preparation that happened before the crisis began. Derinkuyu is not a monument to fear. It is a monument to the productive use of fear, to the civilization-building capacity of taking danger seriously before it arrives. The modern mirror, what Derinkuyu tells us about us. The distance between them and us is shorter than you think. Here's where I ask you to look at this story from a slightly different angle. We tell ourselves that we're different from the people who built Derinkuyu, that we live in a more stable world, with better tools, with science and medicine, and international institutions that manage risk in ways ancient Cappadocians couldn't have imagined. We tell ourselves we don't need to carve 18-story cities into solid rock because we have early warning systems and emergency management and supply chains and all the infrastructure of modern civilization. And that's true. We do have those things. They are genuinely better than what ancient Cappadocians had. But the underlying logic of Derinkuyu, prepare before you need to. Build redundancy into your systems. Think about what happens when multiple things fail simultaneously. Maintain the knowledge across generations that logic is not ancient. It is present. It is active. It is baked into every nuclear power plant safety protocol, every pandemic preparedness plan, every climate resilience framework, every seed bank and water reserve and backup power system that modern civilization quietly maintains. We still build Derinkuyus. We just call them by different names and cover them in concrete instead of carved tuff. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway preserves over 1 million seed samples against the possibility of a global agricultural catastrophe, a modern version of Derinkuyu's grain stores. NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain Complex was built inside a mountain specifically because the mountain itself provides protection that no above-ground structure can match. A modern version of the 18 levels. Government continuity bunkers built during the Cold War, food and water reserves maintained by disaster agencies, the growing movement toward community resilience planning, all of it is animated by the same recognition that drove the builders of Derinkuyu. The sky can fail, and if it does, you want to already be ready. The legacy of the underground, what they actually left us more than tunnels. A lesson carved in stone. In 1963, when that man in Cappadocia knocked down his basement wall and found himself standing at the edge of a 2,800-year-old underground city, he had no way of knowing what he'd found. He probably thought some ancient ruins. Interesting. Archaeologists would want to see this. He didn't think, this is a message written in rock and geometry and engineering, and the specific placement of schoolrooms and wine cellars and stone doors that lock from the inside. A message that has been waiting in the dark for someone to find it and read it correctly. The message is this: we knew that the world could fail. We knew it because it had failed before, in ways our grandparents still remembered, in ways that lived in our bodies and our stories and our nightmares. And knowing that, we didn't give up. We didn't resign ourselves to dying when the next failure came. We built, we planned, we stored. We taught our children how to survive in the dark because we loved them enough to prepare them for a world we hoped they'd never have to face. The most human thing about Derinkuyu is not the engineering. The engineering is extraordinary, but engineering is just applied problem solving. The most human thing is the schoolrooms, the toys, the chapels, the wine cellar. The fact that someone in the process of building the world's most elaborate survival bunker stopped to think, when we're down here, we're going to need to stay ourselves. We're going to need to keep learning and worshiping and drinking good wine and giving our children something to play with. Because surviving isn't enough. You have to survive as something worth being. That's what they left us. Not just tunnels. A philosophy. Fear as fuel. Preparation as love. Darkness as a temporary condition that can be endured if you go into it with enough light stored in advance. The doors remain, the enduring question. What still waits in the dark? Here's the final thing I want to leave you with. The stone doors of Derinkuyu are still there. They still roll. Archaeologists cleared the debris from the tracks, tested the mechanisms, and found that after somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 years, the engineering still functions. The doors still roll closed. The tracks are still level. The 1,000 pounds of stone still moves with one person pushing. If something happened today, if some combination of threats made the surface world of Cappadocia genuinely dangerous, you could walk those 20,000 people back underground. The ventilation shafts would still circulate air. The wells would still tap the same aquifers. The storage chambers would hold as much as they ever did. The city is ready. It has been ready for 2,800 years. The builders made it ready and kept it ready and taught their children to keep it ready, and those children taught their children, and the chain of maintenance and memory stretched forward through dynasties and empires and religious upheavals and language changes and the entire span of recorded history, and the doors still work. That's what keeps me awake, not the mystery of what they were hiding from. We've explored that. We've traced the armies and the volcanic winters and the collapsed civilizations and the myths that carry the memory of catastrophe, like amber carries insects. What keeps me awake is the readiness. The fact that the doors are still there, still functional, still rolling on their tracks. The fact that the ventilation still circulates. The fact that the wells still hit water. The builders of Derinkuyu prepared for threats they expected but couldn't name. They prepared for the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. They built something designed to be ready for whatever comes next, because their experience told them that whatever comes next is always something you didn't quite anticipate. And in the doing of that, in the building of the most complete survival infrastructure the ancient world ever produced, they created something that transcends its original purpose. They created proof that human beings, when confronted with genuine existential risk, are capable of extraordinary things. Not just extraordinary courage, extraordinary foresight, extraordinary love for people who haven't been born yet. The doors are waiting. They have always been waiting. And somewhere, in the part of us that is still wired the way ancient Cappadocians were wired, the part that stockpiles, that plans, that tells cautionary stories to our children, that looks at the sky and wonders we are still listening for whatever made them decide to close those doors. The last thing, before we surface completely, before we step back out into the light, I want to say something about fear. We live in a culture that treats fear primarily as a problem to be solved, something to be managed, medicated, talked through, rationalized away. We distinguish between rational fear and irrational fear, as if the goal were always to get to the side where there's nothing left to be afraid of. Derinkuyu is a different argument. Derinkuyu says, the fear is information. The fear is accurate. The fear is what happens when a community of intelligent, experienced people pays close attention to the world they live in and registers, honestly and without flinching, how dangerous it can be. And then, this is the crucial step, does something about it. Doesn't deny the danger. Doesn't perform optimism over the evidence. Doesn't wait for someone else to solve the problem. Builds, digs in, literally. Builds the shelter first, before the storm arrives. Stores the grain before the famine. Digs the wells before the drought. Makes the toy before the child needs comforting in the dark. Fear, handled that way, is not a weakness. It is an engine, the most powerful engine human civilization has ever produced. Every act of genuine foresight, every backup system, every safety protocol, every emergency plan, everything we do now so that some future version of us has a better chance, runs on that same fuel. The people of Derinkuyu were afraid. They were right to be afraid. And because they were afraid, and because they did something with that fear rather than burying it, 20,000 people survived things that killed empires. That is their legacy. That is the message written into rock. That is what the doors have been waiting to tell us. If this made you think, leave a comment. Tell me what theory you believe. Was it the armies, the volcanic winters, the myths, or something else entirely? Something we haven't figured out yet. And if you want to go deeper into the underground cities of the ancient world, the ones that haven't been excavated yet, the ones that might be even larger than Derinkuyu, subscribe. Because the next question waiting in the dark is even stranger than this one. The doors are still rolling. I'll be here when you get back.